שכל קרוביך לא 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 יבושו ולא יקלמו לנצח כל החוסים בחיי להודיע שכל קרוביך לא 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 יבושו ולא יקלמו לנצח כל החוסים בך.
Hello everyone, this is the third in the series of Parshat Zachor, and today I'd like to deal with the concept of Minyan for Parshat Zachor. We already saw that according to some Rishonim, you need a Minyan for Parshat Zachor in order to lain it and to do the mitzvah properly. However, what is that Minyan? Because when it comes to Megillah reading, which is always the week after Parshat Zachor, sometime during that week, comes along the Shulchan Aruch and Paskins, that Megillah tzarich lechazer achar asara, you should try and get a minyan for Megillah reading, v'im ifshar, but if you can't, then korim oto b'yachid, you read it even without a minyan. The Ramah, right on that Shulchan Aruch, says, v'yesh li histapek im nashim mitztarfot la'asara. Based on Hagaot Oshri, the Ramah says, there's a suffix if women can be comprised for that minyan for Megillah reading. So once again, in Megillah reading, it's a mitzvah to try to read it in a minyan. If you can't, you can read it on your own. But because of that, the minyan does not have to be a halachic minyan. If it was a halachic minyan, then you would not be able to read it without a minyan. Just like you can't say Kedusha and Kaddish and Baruch Hu without a minyan. This is somewhere in the middle. You need a minyan, albeit it's not that halachic minyan that if you don't have it, you can't say it. So here is the question. What with Shabbat Parshat Zachor? If you have 10 women that were watching the young kids in the morning and then go to shul and they come together, they want to take out the Sefer Torah, they assume that they're obligated, and therefore, there's 10 people in the room. Can they make a bracha? Can they do everything as normal if there's 10 women there? Comes along former chief rabbi of Yerushalayim, Rav Zolti, and says, no, according to the Torah Raphael, you should not have 10 people there. What is that talking about? The Torah Raphael was Rav Raphael Shapira, who reopened the Volozhina Yeshiva. And the Volozhina Yeshiva had a Masoret. The Masoret was from the time of the Netziv Mivolozhin, the former Rosh Yeshiva, who wrote about a very interesting situation where they did a Hachnasat Sefer Torah in America, and the donor wanted to not only do it on a Sunday when people are off, but wanted to read from the Torah. We don't read from the Torah on Sunday. So he said, fine, we'll read it without brachos. Comes along to Netziv in a Shut Meshiv Davar and says, it is a bizayon to the Torah to read it without a bracha. And therefore, since you can't make a bracha, you're not supposed to read it on a day in which you don't have to read the Torah, therefore you can't make brachos, don't take it out. In his words, anytime you have to read the Torah, you have to make the Birkas HaTorah. And therefore, on a day that you can't, you ultimately should not read it. Therefore, Rav Raphael Shapira takes it one step further and says, "She'ein ze kvod haTorah, lefi ze ma shenagu hasofrim be'etzium haTorah likot hasiyum betzibur belo bracha lo yafeh him osim." And therefore, he says, not only should women not have this special reading, it's a bizayon. You shouldn't take out the Torah without saying the requisite brachot, and they should not say the brachot if there's only a minyan of women. That's the way the Minchas Yitzchak paskins. He says, Kriyas Parshat Zachor shekorim lashim achar tzarayim kodem mincha levadan bevadayin levarech kivan lechol hapachot tzvir leide pturim. You shouldn't make a bracha because some say they don't have to hear Parshat Zachor v'imenen chayavim en likot b'shvilan levad, and you should try not to read for them alone. On the other hand, comes along the Hararei Kodesh, which is the grandson of Rav Tzvi Pesach Frank, the former chief rabbi of Yerushalayim, writing the notes on the Mikroi Kodesh of Rav Tzvi Pesach Frank, and writes, this seems to be like the Megillah. כשיש להם 10 בפני עצמן, בוודאי דינם כ10 אנשים, שגם בזימון, הרי נשים מזמנות לעצמן. Indeed, if you have 10 women, and we assume that they're obligated in Shabbat Zachor, you can read the Torah, probably with Berachot, because just like they make a zimun on their own, they can make a minyan for Shabbat Zachor on their own. However, Rav Ettlinger in the Shut Binyan Zion says absolutely not. They need a minyan, but they don't comprise a minyan. Just like Rabbi Eliezer had to free his slave, because a slave, like a woman, is obligated in the same mitzvot, and therefore they're not obligated in minyan. The only way you could be part of a minyan is if he frees them. And says the Rosh, it was for Shabbos Parshat Zachor, a biblical commandment. Women cannot join a minyan, just like an Evet Kanani cannot join a minyan unless he's freed and becomes a full-fledged male Jew. And he says the one doesn't relate to the other, because just like a person is obligated in a korban, but he cannot bring it, a Kohen has to bring it on his behalf, so too, a woman is obligated to hear Shabbat Zachor in a minyan, albeit she can't be part of that minyan. Rav Elyashiv agreed with this in 2 different places, in a book called Piskei Shmuot, which is basically, as the title means, Piskei Halacha based on rumors, but in a very known book called Halichot Bat Yisrael that I have, it says explicitly in the name of Rav Elyashiv, Shepashut shetzarich 10 gvarim bebeit hakneset. In the book called Piskei Tshuvos by a Hasidic Talmid Chacham, he writes, "Uminhag kadum bekama kehilot לקרוא במיוחד עבור נשים, בזמן שיכולים לבוא לבית הכנסת, ונכון שיהיו אז בבית הכנסת 10 אנשים." And indeed, he says you should have a real minyan of men. And finally, Rav Sternbuch says, when you don't have a minyan of men, or at least 6 out of 10 of them obligated, ina mitzvah ketakanat chazal. And therefore, it's not the proper way to do it, and therefore, lechatchila, you should have a minyan of men, or read it at Shachris. Indeed, Rav Nebenzahl said in a book called Mikrai Kodesh by Rav Harari, it's a green book, not a brown book, which is Rav Tzvi Pesach Frank's book, he writes that according to the way we understand it, you need 10. 10 is a minyan, and therefore that's the way you should do it, even if you read it later by Mincha. Bottom line, they should go to shul, early minyan, late minyan, husband, wife will work it out, and they'll hear it in a proper minyan. If not, they should try to read it right after mincha, when there's a minyan of men there. Problem, men maybe heard it already in the morning, they're no longer obligated in it. But perhaps here we could be a little more mekel than a regular Kriyas HaTorah. In a regular Kriyas HaTorah, where we define it as Chovat HaTzibor, a communal obligation, you need to have 10 obligated. Here, where it's a personal obligation, albeit you have to do it in a minyan, like Birkas HaGomel, there you could probably be more mekel, just like Birkas HaGomel, and have 10 people that have nothing to do with it in the room, and that would be good enough. If it's impossible, then I believe you should take out the Torah, you should read it, albeit without a bracha. I think you have everything to gain and nothing to lose, except for the Torah Rafal, who says a bizayon, but that's in the Yerushalmi, not in the Bavli. Outside of that point of view, I think that would be the healthy way to go, and that might be something they're obligated in. If there isn't a minyan of men, and there is a minyan of women, I definitely think you should take out the Torah, read it, albeit without a bracha.